Hello, and welcome to the Angry Ewok channel. Today, we will be discussing obstacle placement. When you walk up to a table for a game of Armada, one of the first things that happens is you and your opponent compare points values, see who has the bid, you pick missions, and then the very next step is to place obstacles. And so, it's one of the first decisions you make during the game. It's one of the decisions you make with the least amount of information about how the game is going to go during the game, and it often feels kind of inconsequential. A lot of players, I think, just kind of muddle through this, and I do too a lot of times, just because sometimes obstacle placement is not going to have a huge impact on the game. But there are certain situations when that is not true, when there are some things that you can do to influence the game with your obstacle placement. And some things to begin our discussion with is the fact that in most missions you only have 6 obstacles, and of those you're only going to place 3 of them. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, the 3 obstacles that I get to place, are they going to have a meaningful impact on the game? And oftentimes the answer to that is yes. Good players rarely hit obstacles, and the reason for that is they either deploy around them or they have their speed chart manipulated in such a way that they can jump over them. But it can affect where those ships are placed and can affect how the squadron battle shapes. Also, just remember, you're only placing 3 obstacles, so whatever you're trying to achieve, you got to be able to achieve it with 3 drops. Missions alter a lot of these paradigms, and you have to have the wisdom to know when the mission and the way that mission is going to go is going to shift what you would normally do. And enemy recognition, recognizing what the enemy is trying to do with their fleet and what its main threats are to you, are part of your pregame calculus and are going to affect where you place your obstacles. And so you have to consider all those things, and then you need to come up with a plan to try to neutralize as many of the enemy threats as possible. And we're going to go through some examples of some ways to do that. As some housekeeping before we go to those examples, your basic set of obstacles contains 3 asteroid fields, 1 station, and 2 debris fields. Debris fields obviously doing 2 damage to a shield facing, to a particular facing. Asteroids doing damage as a face-up card, and station healing a damage if you land on top of it. I personally put a lot more stock, and I think most players put a lot more stock in damage cards coming in face up, because you can't crit contain it, and it could potentially cause a lot more problems than 2 shields. I mean, if you're going to take 2 shields from a debris cloud, not really a big deal. Most command ships, they can do an engineering command if they need to. The damage goes onto a facing that you don't really need, so a lot of times it's not critical. I am much more concerned about hitting an asteroid than I am about hitting a debris field, and I feel like you'll find that most players are with me on that. Stations, they heal, that's great, they get rid of a damage card, but because of the nature of ships in this game, it's very hard to get more than 1, maybe 2 cards removed from the station in this way. So station heal, not a big swing, but what it does do is it is a very good tool for preserving damaged squadrons, and we'll even talk about that at a later point, specifically about trying to use the station to protect your squadrons or prevent squad balls that are designed to basically heal damage back from utilizing the station. So I think the station is a much bigger deal for squadrons than for ships, because squadrons can keep going back onto it. They can use it as a means of obstructing, to therefore break engagement and move freely. So station placement is a much bigger deal in a squad-on-squad war than it is in a ship-on-ship fight. The other non-standard obstacles are the Purgil, the dust clouds, the exogurse, and the black hole, basically. Purgil move, and they can be they're kind of long, and they can be rotated such that they are very good for blocking shots. Like if you're playing something like abandoned mining facility, they are excellent for blocking off and obstructing shots to defend your ships, especially as a second player, because you get to move the first one. Also, they're basically space deer, and the faster you're going when you hit them, the more damage you take, which is awesome. You can kind of set up big bases, especially, to take a lot of damage if they're coming in at 2 or 3 and they run over a Purgil. It's like hitting a cow at 50 miles an hour. It's not good. Also, Dust clouds are a big deal, especially in Onager world, because dust clouds block line of sight completely. They don't take a dice, they shut down the entire attack, which is a big deal. It's very good for small ships to duck in and out. Large ships even sometimes can obscure their dots and keep people from shooting. So those can be problematic, especially if you're trying to delay, if you're playing a squad game that's not really interested in a long-range shootout. Just be mindful of those, and those are very mission specific in how they need to be applied. The exogurths are probably the most common thing that you'll see from this set, and the reason for that is there are a lot of people that take asteroid tactics and a lot of people that take infested fields. They're pretty standard mission choices for fleets that don't have a lot of squad cover, and want to supplement that with exogurths because they hit every squadron at range 1 of them with 3 blue dice at the start of the squadron phase, and if they haven't gone, they toggle. So what they do is they put a lot of pressure on the squadrons that are going to get hit to get activated early in the squad phase, in the ship phase, because if they wait to the squad phase, there's a high likelihood that they'll get toggled and won't get to go at all, and you can create this cycle where they can never get away, and the exogurths just munch on them. So you'll see a lot of those. They're also not bad for blocking shots because they can be placed touching a obstacle, and you can get creative with that and block a lot of shots by extending a rock a little bit farther, just enough to block that arc. So those you'll see a lot, but they're mission specific and they're basically anti-squadron obstacles for the most part. The rift slows the game down, slows ships down. It can be a big problem for bigger ships. Small ships, not a big deal. Starhawks don't particularly like it. Supers don't particularly like it, but it's not, I don't think you see it a whole lot really. So when you go to deploy your obstacles, you have to know where you can put them. And they go in what is defined as the setup area outside of distance 3 of the long edges. The setup area, if you look, is actually a 3-foot by 4-foot area of the board that is basically, if you took a foot off of each side of your 6x3 board, so functionally it's 1 ruler in. So basically those obstacles have to be 1 ruler in and distance 3 from the long edges, and so this yellow box is going to show you that. So you got to put your obstacles in there. Because you only get to place 3 obstacles, and because good players are good at avoiding obstacles, if there's a chance for me to get some benefit to my fleet out of the obstacle placement, I would rather do that than try to screw with their deployment. The reason for that is because if I put them there on purpose, I am much more likely to gain the benefits that I put them there for. And the first example of this is to support a slow squad wing against a fast squad wing, particularly against an alpha strike wing. A lot of times I'll deploy kind of like you see here. If you're second player particularly, you might go with the station on one side or the other or the middle, depending on where you plan on being at. Don't get too stuck to that because you don't want to telegraph where you're going to go by your station deployment. But basically what I'm doing is I'm creating little pockets where I can be obstructed, not be engaged, and jump out onto the enemy. What you don't want to do though is you want to just put them so far forward that they can use them as well, and what you don't want to do is fly your ships in such a way that they can be used as flak havens for the enemy. You don't want the enemy to be able to get this rock between them and your flak support and take that option away. If you plan on flying in a nice tight ball to use the overlapping flak fire of your fleet to support your squadron wing, you may not want to do this. But if you have ships that don't lend themselves to that, this is a way to try to protect yourself, soften the alpha, and you want them kind of deployed centrally so that you have a longer threat range. You want to be able to control more of the board, because at this stage in the game, you have no idea where any of the ships are going to be. You have no idea, where their squadrons are going to be. So you just have to make your best guess as you can. Now, the other thing about this is a lot similar to what I try to do as what I call an anti-flak deployment. And the reason for that is because there's munificence with LTT, red flak. There's providences, not providences, but recusants that want the support destroyer, I believe, has a red flak. The Starhawk has a red flak option with LTT. Certain fleets have pretty threatening flak arcs that are very long range, and that can be a problem for, large swarms of generics to approach, because you're starting to allow 10, 15 dice worth of red dice flak to come in with rerolls onto you, and that starts to add up. That can be a tipping point. And so a lot of times you can use that same 3 obstacles across the middle to create this funnel, these safe havens behind which your squadrons can come. Because you also can use your ships, you can use flotillas and such to create that obstruction for yourself, but that may not be possible, and the order of operations of when things are moving is kind of hard to deal with. But you can guarantee that these stations are going to be there, and a lot of times you can herd your squadrons in such a way that they are covered and protected as they approach the enemy's ships. Victory is achieved through good intelligence, and one of the things that you do at the beginning of the game is you go over there and you look at the enemy list, you understand what it does, what it has in its arsenal, and one of the things that you should note as a red flag is if they have an obstacle-related admiral, and at this stage you got to take note of that. General Ramodi, very common Imperial admiral for onagers. General Dodana used to be a really common rebel admiral. I think Agate has replaced him, has the cheapo option for rebels, but sometimes you'll see him in a bomber wing. But his ability does also trigger off of asteroids. So for Ramadi, you want to spread the asteroids. For Dodana, you want to use up all of the asteroids as quickly as you can. Place asteroids and place them in bad places so that he won't trigger. This is an example of how I would typically deploy. And that middle obstacle, I like to put them on my side because I can typically, plan to fly around them. And after turn 1, I've already cleared those obstacles and they don't infect my game anymore. So I like to put them in my corners, assuming that I'm on the bottom of the screen here. Sometimes you may put that third rock that you have to place towards the middle, and that's an option, but for Ramadi especially, he may try to use it as kind of a fire base. He may try to sit down in front of it and pivot and shoot through the obstacle, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you do that, he's giving up his flanks. He's putting himself in the middle of the board, giving himself a lot of options. So if I suspect like an onager or something's going to try to corner camp me, I'll usually put that other obstacle in the middle. And the reason I put it in the middle is because if he wants to use that obstacle, he's going to be in the middle and I can attack him from both flanks. Because you don't want to fight a machine gun nest that's tucked in a valley. You want to fight it in an open field, hit it from both sides. You don't want to fight it, staring straight down the barrel. So that's, Dodana, just hog as many asteroids as you can, push them as far away from as you can. I like to keep them near me so I can just go ahead and fly over them, not worry about them. When I look across the table, if I see enemy ships that are large base particularly, and large bases that are slow or bad at maneuvering, such as Venators that are fast but they don't have a good speed 3 chart, MC-80 Home 1s, which are speed 2 and have engine techs, interdictors, things like that, and Starhawks, things that are not fast and not good at jumping over obstacles, I typically, especially if I'm going to be second player, because if you force them to be first player, or if they choose to be first player, they need to be centrally deployed so they can chase you into either corner, because if you are the first player, you are the aggressor. I hate seeing daggum first players set up in the corner. If you're the first player, you have to initiate the combat. A lot of people will sit in a corner and say, oh, well, he should come at me too. No, if you chose first, you chose to be the aggressor. Go get it. But if you know that's going to happen, a lot of times I'll do this. I call this the triangle, and I'll put it in the middle of the board as tight as I can make it. Usually about distance 1 outside their deployment zone, and then the other 2 rocks will be a little farther, usually distance 3 or 4 outside their deployment zone. The reason I'm doing this is I'm creating a triangle that's hard to drive around and hard to drive through, specifically for large bases. So they're going to have to make a decision a lot of times about where their large base is going to go, and how they're going to navigate around it. And we'll show you, like, if the large base goes dead center, it might be able to jump over it, but it's hard. It's probably gonna not want to go dead center and turn right or left, because it'll take 1 rock in the middle plus another rock on the second turn possibly. You're starting to actually hit them with enough rocks that it's beginning to matter. And then there's a possibility they may deploy on the side, if they're deploying on the side, if you attack from the opposite direction, they have to turn in and they have to negotiate this asteroid field, and it's pretty much the same geometry. That triangle is now, inverted. The base is pointed towards the ship versus the point pointed towards the ship, but they're still flying through that triangle of asteroids, and they're threatening potentially hitting multiple asteroids, or threatening potentially hitting an asteroid 2 times in a row, turn after turn. Speed 2 ships and Speed 2 ships with engine tech do not want any part of this, because they could be hitting and bumping multiple times. So this is a big deterrent. They'll either try to go around it or undercut it. Faster ships may try to jump. The best way, I think, to get through it is to basically have a ship angled and try to jump into the middle, split the asteroids right there. But even if they do this, they're at the very least coming at you fast, because they're trying to jump through and they're almost in the middle of the board here. So this is something I typically will do if I don't have a good reason to do anything else. If I don't have particular need for a squad help, or if I don't particularly think that the asteroids are going to be useful to me, I'll do this just to make it difficult for the enemy fleet to stay together. It messes with their fleet cohesion to do this. If you suspect that the enemy is going to try to corner deploy, you can do something very similar. Now, that being said, there's not a lot of corner deployment fleets anymore, because onagers are very, very good at hunting and killing slow-moving ships in a tight bunch that come out of the corner. That's why you don't see Reich and Aces much anymore. That's why you don't see a lot of Vic fleets, like swarms of Vics coming out of the corner, like you used to sometimes in some places. Grand Army of the Republic, I think, like to come out of the corner. Anything that doesn't turn well and has front-facing guns wants to come out of the corner, turn towards the middle of the board to get their powerful arcs onto the middle of the board and prevent and lessen the likelihood that they're going to get flanked because of their poor maneuverability. If you suspect that's the case, I like to start with my first 2 rocks and go, like you see here, 1 in each corner, and then that 3rd rock that you have to place, you just put it to support one of the 2 obstacles that you've already placed, making that corner less desirable. You're basically, trying to have some influence on, where they're going to set up. They'll probably pick the corner with 1 obstacle instead of 2, and so if you can at least make that happen in such on a side that it thinks is better for you, that's all you're probably going to get here. But or they might deploy slightly towards the middle, which is again achieving the same goal. But if they do deploy in front of it, it's gonna split them. They're gonna have a hard time flying straight through it. They may fly through it and just repair command up on turn 2 and eat the damage. Again, you want asteroids here, because asteroids are harder to get rid of, harder to repair, and have a bigger impact than debris fields if you can help it. But if they do deploy in the corner, and if they split like this, what you've done is you've disrupted their cohesion. 2 ships one trailing the other behind each other don't support each other very well. The only exception to this is, of course, the onager, who often wants to be obstructed and has the range to contribute its firepower to a Star Destroyer or an Aquitaine or something in front of it. You see in a theme here, the onager changes a lot of those paradigms, but in general, making 2 ships follow one another locks them into activation order and makes it hard for the rear ship to support the lead ship. And so this is good for us. This is what we're trying to create with this deployment. There's also some very specific squadron complements that you want to avoid stations being positioned in the middle of the table against. 2 that come to mind is a Biggs ball, for example, Biggs Darklighter, Jan Ors, and any combination or number of X-Wings, possibly Gallant Haven, possibly Jamming Barrier, anything else damage mitigation wise. If you see Jan, Biggs, and some X-Wings, just take it from an old hand who's played this game a long time. You want no part of a station in the middle of the board. You want that thing on the absolute far edge, away from them. And I hesitate to even acknowledge this part, because this is a lot grimier, because Biggs ball works exactly as designed. But if you've ever tried to fight Whisper on or near a station, it is impossible. It is infuriating because every time you shoot her, she's going to spend a defense token and move. And one of the problems, I personally think it's a massive game design problem, is that there's no difference between a move and I'm activating, I'm toggling my slider, I'm moving and shooting. There's no difference in that, and there really should be. But Whisper can flit on and off of a station. She can cloak on and off of a station for the same reason. Tie phantoms anywhere near a station you want no part of. And the reason I think this is, I thought very serious about not even mentioning this in this article, but I feel like, to do my diligence, I need to acknowledge Moralo Eval. If you've got any choices, and you typically will not, because they will be playing him as the second player if they can help it. Place that station way the heck away from Moralo, because if you don't, because there's no difference in a move triggered by Squall and a move triggered by his ability on all that noise, he can hop on and off of the station and regenerate multiple health a turn. Again, I really think this is a game design error. I don't want to mention it. I don't think you should play with it or against it, but if you see it and you have a choice and they don't put that station near the middle, which they should, if they know what they're doing, they should put it in the corner. Do something like this. If you can drop your 3 obstacles in a configuration, something like this, what you're basically, that's the perfect scenario. And what you're basically doing is you're saying, well, if you want to use this trick, your fleet has to be, your squadrons that are going to use it are going to have to remain in this section of the table, and that gives you a lot of space to work with. Even if you're trying to attack into it, you can kind of delay, and then rush it all at one time. What you don't want is a protracted air war with a station near the middle of the table where they can flit onto and off of the station. Things with Cloak can leave engagement. Things with Janors have grit. So it's hard to tie them down. It's easier than it was, but things like Shurino make that also kind of difficult. So just a word to the wise: if you see any of these squadrons, if you have any choices, move the station to either your far corner or to their back corner, to where they have to slow roll into you, and you can control the pace of the engagement and engage late and give them very limited time to utilize it. Because if you let them attrition and use it over and over, it will break you. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And as a conclusion, you're controlling your 3 obstacles, but you can also kind of pigtail off of what the other guy's doing too. Like if he places an obstacle near the middle of his deployment, that's not the station, obviously. A lot of times I put the station out there, but like he puts a debris towards the middle of his deployment zone, you can incorporate his obstacles into your triangle block, and make it even harder. Now, him putting it there, maybe he's wanting a jumping off point for his squadrons. Maybe he wants a place that his squadrons that don't have grit access can hide and then pounce forward. So you got to be careful of that. You got to think about those kind of things as well. The difference in variation is so broad we can't go into that, but just realize that this is an alternating thing. I go, you go, I go, you go. So be watching what he's doing. Don't just tunnel vision on, well, I'm going to do my little deal. I'm going to make my triangle. I'm going to do my little deal. I'm going to make my corner block. But if he gives you an opening to achieve something similar, you may be able to pivot into that and get kind of steal a 4th obstacle, so to speak. Maybe steal a 5th obstacle, so to speak, depending on if he's just placing it without too much consideration, or he might be trying to bait you and he's got you. So I'm probably reading a lot more into it than there is. Most people are just like, oh, the station, it's cool, it heals my stuff, I want that near me, I'm going to put it over here, and then that's pretty much the end of it. But you can do some things that can help you and hurt them, and don't ignore it. Don't just throw rocks on the table, because this is a tournament game. It's designed for tournaments. It's one of the few games where you see the matchup and know who's going first, before the terrain is even placed on the table. There's no other war game that I know of that has that, and that is a big deal. The agency that a player has in the terrain on the table is huge compared to most games. I know if I go to a Legion tournament, I have a list that's built for a Legion tables that have enough terrain, and Legion tables that are 40k people who put terrain down and thought it was Legion approved. I don't travel more than 45 minutes without 2 lists to a tournament, because terrain is such a big deal in that game, and there's not any player agency over that. In this game, that is gone. That is not an issue. It is fixed, and it's even fixed at a state where a lot of information about how the game is going to progress. So use it for everything it's worth, because every single player has access to this. This is not a faction lock thing. My belief is that anything that everybody can do in equal measure is not broken. You have no reason to try to, pull yourself back and gentleman's agreement yourself into, being kind, if everybody can do it and everybody can do it equally. Everybody's dropping 3 rocks of whatever type's there, and the order of placement is known, or you're playing a mission that's set, and you could have picked that mission in your deck too. So to me, you can be as ruthless with this as you want to be and not feel bad about it, because you're doing something that every single person can do in Armada, in every single game, and it's not faction locked. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day.